Hey, it's Bilal, and this is Deep Sea, the podcast that's seeing the world more deeply. We've all played Monopoly. You go around the board, you try to accumulate sets of properties, ideally the green and dark blue ones, you build hotels, and then drive everyone else into bankruptcy. It can often drag on and on and on, but it's worth the wait if it means you defeat your siblings. But did you know that this celebration of monopolistic capitalism was actually based on a game that was meant to show the evils of monopolies? Elizabeth Magie, an American, was a huge supporter of the concept of Georgism. This was the idea laid out by the 19th century economist Henry George that the wealth accrued from land should be shared equally amongst all members of society. Meanwhile, wealth accrued from businesses should remain with the wealth creator. Wealth derived from land was often inherited and led to much wider and persistent inequalities in society, so thought Henry George. Elizabeth thought a board game would be the best way of popularizing this idea. And in 1903, she created the Landlords Game. It was, in her words, a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing with all its usual outcomes and consequences. The board looked like the modern-day Monopoly, but it had two versions, an anti-monopolist version and a monopolist version. The anti-monopolist rules rewarded everyone from the wealth accrued from land. Land rent would be paid into a public treasury, while the house rent would go to the player who built a house. When the public treasury had built up enough money, it would then provide free education and transport, which would help all players. The game would end when the player with the lowest monetary amount had doubled their original stake. So everybody would be the winner. Meanwhile, the Monopoly rules version was similar to the game we have today. The goal was to form monopolies and drive everyone else into bankruptcy. Elizabeth hoped that people, especially children, would play both versions and realize the evils of monopoly and concentrated land ownership. While the intentions were noble, the dark side of humanity intervened. In the early 1930s, a chap called Charles Darrow was introduced to the game, and he much preferred the Monopoly rules version. He patented it and made millions from the subsequent popularity of the game. Elizabeth, meanwhile, was paid a pittance for the original patent without full knowledge of the aim to launch only the Monopoly version. Conveniently, her part in the history of the game was erased. So if Monopoly represents inequality, then the anti-Monopoly version of the Landlords Game represents fairness. Given the world we live in today, I'd say perhaps now is the time to bring back that game. So, does anyone know how to launch a board game? If so, drop me a line. Thanks for listening. Please tell a friend about the podcast, leave a rating on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you go for your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @BilalHafiz123. That's @BilalHafiz123. You can also follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or on my blog, bilalhafiz.com. Finally, for my research work, you can go to macrohive.com. I'll be back soon, so tune in then.